Wondering what he will put this time. Wondering what he will put this time. Wondering what he will put this time. Wondering what he will put this time.
With the first single of Breach, The Contract, having just been officially released, it's necessary for everyone to get caught up to speed on where exactly we're in the lore, specifically on the lore presented to us in the recent leg of the FPE exhibit. With the ending of the story right around the corner, it is all the more important to understand what these letters are telling us about the situation currently, and potentially where we may be going. If you've never heard of the FPE exhibit before until now, in short, it's a mini-museum that was hosted at every concert for this leg, containing memorabilia from the band's history. This exhibit was also where we received letters in the Bandito camp section of the museum, these letters relating to the lore. This isn't the first time the pilots have done something like this either. The FPE exhibit was also hosted for the entirety of the US leg, also featuring letters too. If you want a recap of all of those letters and what they tell us, I have made this recap video here. It's a bit of a lengthy watch, but it's worth your time if you want to understand all of those letters. Another important thing to note is that, like the US letters, these letters also had a code. At the bottom of every letter was Morse. Combining the Morse symbols between the conversation groups would get you one letter. Altogether, the code was Breach, in reference to the new 21 Pilots album. Much like I did last recap video, I will be analysing the content of these letters to see what it can tell us about the direction of the story, or if it can add to our current understanding of the world around us. Furthermore, I'll also be detailing the meanings of the names used in these letters. In this story, names do have meanings, such as Nico being a reference to the Bourbaki group, and so some of these meanings add to the content of the letters, or are in reference to Simone Weil, a philosopher and activist who was the sibling of Bourbaki group founder Andre Weil, much like the US batch of letters. Soren. For the first time in a long time, I didn't hear your song last night. Something so consistent and reliable, I realized that I take it for granted, so much more evident last night when I heard silence. But we need it. Your strings echo out from the valley and hit my tent just right. It's become my serenade in these hills, a reverberation of subtle memory that calms me and lets me know that I am home. I rely on it, and I think we all need it. I'm grateful for scarves to warm my face and coats to insulate me, but this everlasting melody that you send through these mountains, it covers me. It covers all of us. It reminds us who we are and what it means to be free. I hope you're okay. I hope to hear you play again. Listening always, Carmen.
Carmen, I'm still here. Thank you for your letter. At times, I feel so isolated in front of that small fire that I forget people are listening. It's usually just me up there, a watcher without a partner, trying to keep myself awake by noodling on this instrument. So I speak to someone, to all of you. I'm glad to know you here, and more importantly, that it's important. I'm embarrassed to admit that I fell asleep for a second last night. I was so worried of dozing off again that I didn't play music, just stood at attention all night, looking over the hill. I don't want to miss the signal. I haven't lost faith in the plan. I know the signal is coming, but some nights it's hard to stay awake. I'll keep playing. Sometime, if you're not too tired, I would love company. 4 eyes are better than 2. They should give us a sign any day now. Steadfast, Soren.
The first 2 names we have are Carmen and Soren. Carmen's name has 2 potentially important pieces of information associated with it. First of all, Carmen means song or poem in Latin, something very fitting as the letter documents Carmen listening to Soren's ukulele or guitar playing. Secondly, the name could be a reference to scholar Carmen Revilla Guzman, who has written many works trying to decipher Simone Weil's life and ideas. Considering Clancy, who I have established has several links to Simone Weil in this video here, is the origin of a lot of people's escapes from Dema due to the existence of Dema.org exposing the truth of the city, it may not be a stretch to imply that this name is in reference to the fact that a lot of escapees and banditos alike have, at some point, sought to understand Clancy's ideas and life in order to escape and rebel. This letter does a bit of world building for us. Firstly, considering the letter talks about valleys and tents, we know that this letter is written between 2 people in trench, particularly 2 people who are part of the Bandito camp. This is actually a consistent pattern kept up in all the other later letters down the line. Unlike the US FPE letters, which were between citizens talking about staging a rebellion within the city after the events of Overcompensate, the EU and UK leg letters are between banditos in trench. Secondly, this letter is in reference to car radio, bandito, and jumpsuit. Carmen talks about needing music to calm the camp, understanding its importance particularly after a night of silence, which is in reference to the inspiration of car radio. Furthermore, the mention of music echoing through the valley, reverberating subtle memories of home, covering the camp and reminding them of their freedom and who they are, definitely has roots in the lyrics. The softest echo could be enough for me to make it through from Bandito. And, of course, the repetition of cover me is a direct callback to jumpsuit, the phrase often used to ask for protection. Not only does this reinforce notions that music, ergo creativity, is a form of protection against the bishops and their negative mental influence, but the fact that Carmen and others are in need of that protection, in need of that serenade that calms and reminds them all the way out in trench, does show that despite escaping, people are still affected by the horrors of Dema, the teachings of vilism, and the influence of the bishops. Trench does not guarantee freedom from internal struggles or hardship, but unlike Dema, where citizens are isolated and encouraged to succumb to these struggles, in Trench, the banditos do have a support network to lean on. And whilst I did touch on this does confirm to us that the phrase cover me isn't just for when one needs direct protection from a physical threat, but from a mental one as well. We then have Soren, which has particularly Danish and Norwegian roots, meaning strict or severe. This doesn't necessarily have a strong link to the content of Soren's letter, but it could be in reference to how the banditos are still suffering severely themselves despite their freedom. Another important link is that this name could be in reference to Danish philosopher Soren Kierkegaard, a pioneer of the existentialism movement. Existentialism often focuses on the meaning or purpose of life, particularly asserting that there is no predetermined purpose, and rather it is our free will that determines and develops this. It's also important theory regarding the pilot's work, as a lot of content from Vessel particularly dives into existentialism and notions of purpose in life. And this is more prominently highlighted in songs like Car Radio. Soren's letter again reinforces the message that people within the camp are still struggling. Soren feels isolated, and it's implied that they do not necessarily see their issues as important, so much so that they need to talk through their struggles with others and feel glad when others validate their importance. Reading between the lines, the reason why Soren particularly struggles with isolation is that they have lost their partner. And I mean partner as in their fellow watcher, as Soren describes themselves as a watcher without a partner. implying the normal procedure is to have 2 watchers together. This partner may have been recaptured or may have died, which definitely adds to the subtle tragedy of this letter. Secondly, this letter does give us some more parallels between the bishops and the banditos for those who really want to drive home the notion that the groups are 2 sides of the same coin. Soren calls himself a watcher, the exact same phrase used for guards of Dema. It's just interesting to see that the banditos have structured themselves in a similar way to the bishops. The third thing Soren's letter gives us is the beginning of these letters' timeline. Considering Soren talks about keeping awake in the middle of the night, waiting for a signal, and not losing faith in the plan, a quote directly ripped from Dema org letter 02203 Moon 18, Soren is watching for the signal we see Clancy give at the end of the Outside music video, setting the start of these letters as being just before Overcompensate.
Brikka, I found something. Towards the bottom of the East Canyon, near the base of the vulture tree, is a small cave. I've been coming back to it for the last few days, trying to document everything I can. The walls are filled with art and symbols. It looks old, like very old. Some of the art is stained into the stone, and some was carved, but carved long enough ago to now be weathered and smoothed over. But my perspective has changed now. About us and about all of this. This fight against vialism is not new, and our rebellion, it appears, has been going on for ages. In a sense, I'm inspired, but I'm also slightly disheartened now that the struggle appears to be endless. I hope you can meet me here soon. I can't wait for you to see it. Preston.
Dear Preston, I can't wait to see it. I've always wondered who inhabited these hills before us. This is one of the most crippling elements of vialism, that they withhold the past from us and try to make us believe their teachings are all that there ever have been. It means that we are not the first to leave Dema, and to rebel against that system. How long has this system existed? How long have these hills been inhabited? What else is out there entrenched? The hunt for answers continues. Brikka.
Preston is our next writer, the name being Old English for Priest's Town. Something very fitting for this letter, as in lore, the priest's town in question is Dema, the town run by bishops. And Preston is attempting to uncover the truth about Dema's history. Furthermore, in the spirit of historical research, Preston could also be in reference to historian Paul Preston, who has several books documenting the Spanish Civil War, of which Simone Weil participated in. Preston's letter is filled with oodles of lore. Firstly, the content of the letter details finding a cave full of art and carvings that depict old battles against vialism, that this rebellion stretches back incredibly far in history, so much so that whilst Preston takes solace in knowing they aren't the first to seek freedom, he's also disheartened by the fact that no one has clearly succeeded yet. To me, this seems to refer to the contextual meaning of this story. Mental health is a cycle. You can't eradicate it, ergo completely and suddenly cure all your internal struggles. You can only learn to coexist and manage them, adapt and overcome their presence in your life. A message talked about in Oldie Station. Personal struggles can seem endless, but over time we do get used to them and can manage them until they become nothing but white noise in the background. With this allusion to the cycle, it does make me think this is also a subtle pointer that this story will end with the cycle restarting and Clancy waking back up in the HDS car. Secondly, we also have mention of technically a new location, the Vulture Tree. This isn't the first time we've actually heard of it. It wasn't mentioned but was drawn in the I Am Bandito Spotify game, alongside the definition of the vulture symbol. Particularly, it is also the tree used in the visuals for trees for the Bandito tour and the Clancy tour. This does recontextualize the lyrics of trees quite a bit, implying that the thing Tyler wishes to know wishes to say hello to the vultures, or more metaphorically, symbols of new beginnings and purification. Vultures are commonly associated with death, but they do also carry these positive meanings in line with more Zoroastrian beliefs which have had influence in the story, and are also Bandito beliefs as per the Spotify game. Meanwhile, Brikka is a slightly more complicated name. It has no historical or Simone Weil relevance, and has a very inconsistent meaning. The closest thing I could find is that in Sanskrit it means heart or kidney, which in itself does highlight those Zoroastrianism links again. Whilst Sanskrit was not used by Zoroastrians, Avesta is still related to Sanskrit via branching from the same ancestral language, and the reference to organs is a strong reminder of how Zoroastrians placed dead bodies in towers of silence to prevent pollution, allowing birds such as vultures to feast on the flesh and organs until only skeleton bones remained to be put in the central pit and allowed to decompose. Brikka's letter honestly doesn't give us much, only reaffirming that the true history of Dema and Trench in turn have been censored and erased by the bishops in the name of Vialism, a statement first mentioned to us in I Am Clancy. This has echoes of how society functions in George Orwell's 1984, where history is actively edited and erased in the Ministry of Truth to fit the party's ideologies and maintain control of the populace by limiting thought and preventing citizens from having tangible evidence to prove their memories or have reference for a time that was different. By limiting thought, making people doubt their memories and not giving scenarios for a time when society was different, it ultimately prevents rebellion, as people do not know any better than what they are currently living, and won't have the ability to criticize so.
Hilt. Do you ever stare at the horizon, wondering what it would look like without Dema's silhouette? An unending line of beauty, uninterrupted by the system that polluted us. What would it have been like to have been born out here and never forced into living so unnaturally? Would we be different? Would we be less guarded and less tormented? What would we dream of? I often stare at those 9 posts of arrogance and wonder what they truly took from me. I don't know, just wondering if you've ever found yourself as fascinated with the thought of an alternate horizon, or maybe I need to get to sleep.
Gwen. Cheer up, we're not there anymore. We regain control of our lives and our choices. We should look back upon the main attractions. Without it, we would have never learned to fight. Without it, we would have taken all this freedom for granted. The pain of that place makes these wild hills and caves more of a retreat. We are ourselves out there, and we would have never found it without them. You defeated them, and I'm proud of you. Hilt.
The name Gwen is Welsh in origin, meaning white, fair and blessed. It brings up ideas of purity, innocence and optimism, something extremely ironic considering the content of this letter speaks only of hardship, suffering and the horrors. Either way, this meaning is likely in reference to how Gwen fantasizes about a trench not tainted or polluted by the existence of Dema. Gwen's letter reinforces the content seen in Soren and Carmen's letter. People in Trench are still suffering from the impact of the bishops and vialism. In Gwen particularly, given her harsh language and almost insistence on the total eradication of the existence of Dema to restore beauty to Trench, this suffering that the bishops have imparted on her has left her extremely angry at how they've changed her life, changed her, so much so that it often causes her to lose sleep. This makes Hilt's letter incredibly funny, as he almost seems to go, lol, I know that sucks for you, but cheer up. It seems even the Banditos are not immune to come across as tone deaf or insensitive, but I do feel like that adds to how realistic this group are. They're all broken people trying their best. Speaking of Hilt, his letter is arguably vastly more interesting in what it subtextually implies to us. Firstly, Hilt is an Old English name that refers to the handle of a sword or dagger, which not only matches with the notion of battle we see the Banditos preparing for this era, but can be considered a reference to the lyric in Morph. And under is sword to sleeve. an idiom that means to stop fighting, as putting a sword in a sleeve is to put it in its scabbard. Hilt also has some references to Simone Weil through a popular phrase of hers from the notebooks of Simone Weil. Contact with the sword causes the same defilement, whether it be through hilt or point. A fitting phrase considering Gwen's letter talks about Dema being a form of pollution. This phrase means that regardless of whether you wield or are harmed by a sword, you are tainted by violence and war. This link to Simone Weil, paired with the reference of an idiom meaning to stop fighting, links to what was implied in Preston's letter. This is a cycle, and mental health is not something you can just destroy and forever be cured of. Constantly seeking to permanently annihilate your struggles is not healthy, as it can lead to unhealthy coping mechanisms, short-term solutions, or even self-hatred when relapse or struggles do manifest themselves again. This current form of rebellion and battle by the Banditos is not healthy, and it is tainting the Bandito movement. Instead, they require a truce to truly get over Dema and heal from its influence. This idea is even more prominent when looking at the content of Hilt's letter. Aside from it reaffirming that Trench truly is far better for escapees, and that the Banditos do exist as a support network to each other, the most intriguing aspect is that the word triumph is capitalized, elevating it to a proper noun, implying it is more than just a word, but an important concept or ideology to the Banditos. Triumph means to rejoice, feel joyful, celebrate, or take pride in the prospect of success. Highly innocent on the surface level, Hilt is asking Gwen to take pride in the fact that she has survived and escaped, a message seen in Oldie's Station. Gwen would have never learned to fight, never learned to combat struggles if she had no struggles in the first place, which is a very clear link to the mental health message that personal struggles are necessary in life, reaffirming that total eradication of these struggles, of Dema, is not healthy or viable. What caught my attention the most, though, is that triumph as a verb is a synonym for glory, the concept the bishops use to justify vialism and death. So much so that they name literally every vilist practice and related terminology to it. Glorious gone, assemblage of the glorified, all earthly honour unto the glorious gone. This again feels like a nod towards the fact the bishops and the Banditos are two sides of the same coin. Both are very much necessary to exist and have in one's life, but also seems a subtle nod that if the Banditos are not careful and allow this taint, a taint we have started to see and overcompensate with the emphasis on serving the Banditos, use of religious language and imagery akin to vialism, as well as reclaiming bishop colours, by battle to grow further, the focus on triumph can change from something innocent, of taking pride in survival, to become twisted into glory and taking pride in destruction, whether that be of another or the self. In short, this letter could be foreshadowing where the Banditos are going, that they will become like the bishops if they're not careful.
Tari. I found myself reminiscing about Bishop Nils last night. A long while back, he actually rescued me from nearly falling back through a window while playing tug-of-war in class. He was there and he caught me. I looked up at him, and the relief in his eyes that I was alright caught me so off guard. In that moment, he cared for me. He wasn't as devoid of emotion as normal. There was no tension. Just care. I think about it often. Who was he before he was a bishop? He had to have been a kid just like us at some point, right? He had to have been loose and wild at some point, right? Were they born this rigid, or was it taught to them? Went.
I remember that day, a rare moment of chaos inside the perfect walls of Dema. I'm glad he caught you, but I have to admit I find it appalling to see you write about a bishop the way you have. They berate us, but also claim to protect us. It's hard to tell if we are hated or loved. If it is love, it's a form that I cannot recognize, and it's a form that certainly doesn't feel like love. It all feels like a trap. Not sure I've wondered about who the bishops were as kids, or even if they ever were kids. As I get older, I question their age more and more. Tari.
Wendt is a name that derives from the German word Wendy, meaning wanderer or nomad. A good name for this letter considering a wanderer is someone who, well, wanders. They have no set destination and can be considered as lost. Meanwhile, Wendt speaks incredibly highly of Nils, one of the 9 bishops not talked about a lot in the lore, implying that mentally they are a little lost, not certain if the bishops are truly the enemy. As aforementioned, Wendt's letter gives us a lot of food for thought regarding the bishops, particularly Nils, the bishop associated with Gunnar. As I established in this theory video a good long while ago, the reason why Keons betrayed his fellows is because he cared for his citizens rather than the benefits Wyllism could give him. This is fundamental proof that the bishops are not simply these shallow bad guys, evil for the sake of it, but they do have the capacity for good. This letter not only reaffirms this idea, but now tells us that other bishops share this mindset as well. In that moment, he cared for me. He wasn't as devoid of emotion as usual. I think it's important to remember that each of the songs the bishops are based on are songs represented by a specific pattern, referred to as a tapestry by album designer Brandon Reich. The reason for these different patterns is that they represent different traits in ourselves, traits that can be tainted, manipulated, and warped by Blurryface until we dislike them. These songs are representations of things tainted or controlled by Blurryface, ergo perhaps the same principle can be applied to the bishops. They were all people inevitably tainted by Blurryface, by Nico, resulting in them becoming as harsh as they are now. Either way, Wendt raises some good questions, asking about whether the bishops were always this way, whether they had a childhood, which does imply something happened to change the bishops, maybe this warping that Blurryface has done. Tari's name has a lot of meanings to it, with origins in Arabic, African, and Irish. In Ijaw, it can mean love, whilst in Irish it can mean rocky hill, two potentially relevant links since the Banditos do live near rocky hills, and that this letter is about debating the bishops' form of love. Tari's response is arguably a little harsh. Much like Gwen, we see that strong rage that is natural given the circumstances, but also concerning given its intensity. They proceed to question the contradictory behaviour of the bishops, appalled that anyone would think positively of them, which reminds me of yet another 1984 link. Doublethink. Doublethink is a notorious concept from the book. This is where a person holds and accepts 2 opposing opinions or beliefs at the same time. An example of this is one of the book's signature phrases, "War is peace." Both of these ideas are the antithesis to one another, and yet they're accepted in this society to be the same. The purpose of doublethink is to narrow the range of thought, render the populace unable to think critically. If there are no opposing arguments, there is no need for people to analyse these concepts, or think about the merits and disadvantages of each concept. No need for them to think which idea they prefer or support more. Furthermore, this also reduces the understanding of language, which again further limits thought because we think in words. And so if the words we think in are limited, our way of understanding things controlled, we are ultimately less likely to think critically of things. Finally, presenting opposites as the same also creates confusion. And confusion, not being able to understand things, ultimately prevents people from being able to actually analyze and criticize things. They have no bearing on reality. We see this attempt to instill doublethink with this notion that the bishops act as if they both love and hate the citizens of Dema, both berate and claim to protect them. By confusing the populace, making them uncertain of reality, they're less likely to form the thought needed to be critical of the bishops and rebel against them, and by believing what the bishops are doing is out of love, ultimately causes the citizens to accept the treatment they are receiving and further prevents escape. Ultimately, these two letters present two opposing ideas. The bishops either do care but have lost such interest over the years, or something has happened to cause them to lose that care, or this love displayed by the bishops is nothing but a trap, another manipulation tactic to prevent the citizens from rebelling by controlling their thought first. Or maybe these two statements can coexist. The bishops did once truly care, and now merely pretend to. It's difficult to say which of the two is more probable. Keons has shown that the bishops have the capacity to care, but the secret of vilism and tendency for the bishops to use modes of propaganda to prevent rebellion also show they have a penchant for deceit and manipulation to get what they want. Plus, Went looks at the bishops with a bias of wonder and nostalgia, whilst Tari is notably biased due to their blatant anger and disgust, so much so that they're willing to insult the perspective of their friend. For two letters that tried to world build into the lives of the bishops, they ultimately failed to do so, as neither letter is more convincing. We are back to the very start again in trying to understand our antagonists. What it does do, however, is add to the intrigue of the bishops and the mystery behind their existence, as well as further elaborating on the ways the bishops govern their districts. The final words from Tari in this letter are also potentially quite interesting. As I get older, I question their age more and more. We know that vilism and the ritual of seizing are the reason why the bishops are able to prolong their life. Vilism is a lie that tells the citizens they will find glory through death, but in actuality, the bishops use this as an excuse to have a supply of bodies to seize, the seizing allowing them to prolong their life by draining energy from the body, or allowing them to put themselves in a new body if their old one begins to degrade too much. This is often the secret that pushes people to leave Dema, but this statement implies that not all escapees know this secret, and not all banditos are aware either. The ignorance to one of the root reasons for their cause is kind of shocking, since it does also depict this notion that not all banditos know truly what it is that this rebellion is fighting for, which can lead to misunderstandings of what their movement actually is, and ultimately an inability to see when they become like those they are fighting against.
Magnus, I assume you're back at base. We found a spot on the outer perimeter of Dema and set up a camp here. We arrived thinking that we would log the routines of the guards and report back with their schedule. But things are moving fast. Magnus, Clancy has done it. The front line was able to push through the guards while he found a way into the city. They distracted everyone and now Clancy is in. He is what he told us he was. He has led us all to this moment, and it's his time to take over. Clancy will be even more powerful than Nico. They have no idea what is coming. Victorious, Baldur.
Baldur, I'm happy to hear the movement has progressed, but I'm worried about your desire for Clancy to be more powerful than Nico. Is this what you wanted? Is this what any of us wanted? Nico's power is the element that has given Dema and vilism such an iron fist. More power, even if it's Clancy's power, will corrupt the movement we fought so hard to bring to Dema. We are all one people, and people striving for hope and victory, not more tyranny. Clancy must know that. Fraught, Magnus.
Speaking of misunderstandings as to what the Bandito movement is actually fighting for, Baldur and Magnus, everybody. Baldur's name brings up quite a lot of lore-coloured flags instantly. Baldur is a god from Norse mythology whose death was prophesied to bring Ragnarok, basically an apocalypse characterised by all-out war, natural disasters, and the eventual burning of the entire world. In order to prevent this, his mother Frigg made every object on Earth vow not to harm him, the only one not doing so being a mistletoe. What inevitably happened is that Loki manipulated blind god Hozier and Baldur's brother to accidentally kill him. This feels reminiscent to the lore in some way. Clancy feels like a stand-in for Baldur, someone who cannot be harmed properly due to his important nature as a weapon and the capability to seize, and whose death will likely bring a lot of flames onto the Dema towers if theories regarding them burning Dema whilst Clancy is confronting Nico are to be believed. What is especially concerning is, given what the next two letters after this discuss, this also implies there is a possibility of Torchbearer accidentally killing Clancy. Baldur's name also relates to Simone Weil, as she wrote about the god in her first and last notebooks published by the OUP in 1970. To basically sum up the book content regarding Baldur, Weil specifically talks about him because she believed the public should have access to and be able to relate to medieval ideas that consisted of both conservative ideologies and a desire for justice. From understanding the supernatural presented in medieval ideas, humanity would stop exhibiting animalistic behaviour. This again feels like a further warning that the Banditos not only need to be careful lest they become like animals, but that they need to find balance, not just lean too far into one extreme. Perhaps this is why discovering the true history in Brikka and Preston's letters are so important, as these medieval ideas presented in those symbols will help guide the Banditos better. The content of this letter actually updates the timeline. Baldur talks about setting up a camp close to Dema's perimeter, which is seen in the Paladin Strait music video at the very beginning. Then, Baldur states Clancy has done it. The front line was able to push through the guards while he found a way into the city, which happens towards the end of the music video. Therefore, these two letters take place during Paladin Strait. Then, we get the words that truly tell us all is not well in the rebellion. It's his time to take over. Clancy will be more powerful than Nico. For the longest time, it has been pretty well documented that the purpose of the Bandito rebellion is to destroy vialism and remove the bishops from power, liberate the citizens. But this statement suggests now that not all Banditos see this as their goal. Some believe rather than liberating Dema from the bishops, they should rather replace them with Clancy, someone more powerful than Nico. Given what is documented in earlier letters, this now presents us with three schisms. Those, like Gwen, who wish for total eradication of Dema as a whole, as it presents too many painful memories, those who wish to liberate the citizens, and those like Baldur who want to take over Dema. In fact, remember those warnings I talked about earlier of some Banditos not properly understanding their movement, which will inevitably result in them becoming like the bishops and not realizing it? Of instances where a focus on triumph for triumph's sake will only become the new glory? They are once again repeated here, when Baldur signs his letter out with victorious, a synonym for both glory and triumph. As for Magnus, he's probably the only name I cannot really find a concrete link for. His name means greatest, whilst there is no Simone Weil connection for him either. His letter also unfortunately does not do much, only states that absolute power in one person's hands corrupts. So Clancy taking over Nico's mantle is probably not the best idea, and that this really isn't what the Bandito movement is about. They want hope and victory, not more tyranny. Clancy must know that. Spoiler alert, it seems like Clancy did not know that.
TB, the crown is heavy, but I can carry it. This city needs hope, and alone I can give it to them. But the city needs to feel powerful again, and snap out of the lifeless obedience that they've been trapped in. I can give it to them. I gave them hope. I will be their example of absolute power. I feel alive again. Clancy.
Clancy, never forget the cries of your people. Never forget the raw fear that fueled you, or the rebels that made you who you are today. We are all one. We destroyed them so that we didn't become them. We must do better, Clancy. We must do better. TB.
Now, I want to preface this by saying that Clancy and Torch's letters are actually pretty unique out of this batch, aside from simply just being by two of our main characters. They are the only two letters that do not have a number on them, so it's difficult to understand exactly when these letters were sent. We can safely say that it is probably after Overcompensate and Navigating, as the FPE letter in the US leg talks about content available in Overcompensate, and before Clancy is actually reunited with the Bandito camp. We know by process of elimination that these letters cannot be sent after or at the end of Paladin Strait, as by that point, Clancy has been smeared by the bishops, hardly able to write a letter. So the only likely contender for the letters between Clancy and Torchbearer is before the events of Paladin Strait, but after Navigating. Also, despite Torch's letter being the first released, it does seem like his letter is the last to be sent. A cautionary warning trying to remind Clancy of their cause after Clancy starts exhibiting signs of going rogue. So with that in mind, Clancy's letter. Clancy's letter tells us that he is of the same opinion as Balder, using language like absolute power, I alone, and even I gave. It all denotes this idea of Clancy not only being powerful and in control, but also this idea that he believes he's the only one that can seemingly improve Dema's situation, completely and arrogantly cutting out the Banditos' contribution. Not only that, but he refers to the mantle of taking the role of the bishops as a crown, an accessory associated with monarchy, showing that now his true motivation is to rule as a sole ruler, not even giving the illusion of democracy with 8 other disgruntled colleagues. He has fully gone off the rails, believing that he needs to rule, that Dema needs power to snap out of their obedience, not liberation. As Magnus stated, power does corrupt, and Clancy is turning into a tyrant. What is also concerning is that Clancy's letter echoes a phenomenon only seen in the bishops. The crux of Clancy's confidence, as well as his power over the bishops, is his ability to seize as an exception. But, as established, seizing can be used to drain energy or transfer oneself into a new body. That being said, it's interesting that this power of seizing has resulted in Clancy feeling alive again, just like the bishops do when they extend their lifespan using such a power. In response, Torchbearer's letter is trying to ground Clancy, trying to remind him not only of fellow escapees and citizens, but also his own fear of vilism and the bishops that fueled his escape from them. Torchbearer's letter is very much trying to humble Clancy, and the use of words like never and must portray just how nervous and desperate Torchbearer is to not have Clancy as part of the problem. The last few lines of Torch's letter directly echo the code from the US letters. We must destroy them, or we will become them, and if we become them, we must do better. His letter, however, implies that both routes have already happened. They have destroyed the bishops to some degree, but they are still also becoming the bishops despite this, and so they must do better not to. And that's it for this video. I cannot believe this recap is almost as long as the one that had like 10, 11 different letters in the US leg. I think this one was a lot more content heavy this time. There was a lot more stuff to analyze. Anyway, back to the basement I go, because I need to work on analyzing the contract.